Good Friday afternoon to you. Hope your weekend is off to a great start. Thanks for joining us on Sports4CLE. A little later in the show, we will be joined by Buckeyes beat reporter for the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, Stephen Means. We'll talk a little bit about that proposal to expand the college football playoffs to 12 games. Also a little bit about Buckeyes spring football. But plenty of Browns football to talk about, and that's where we begin. Andrew Berry was on the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays, a new podcast talking about the philosophy that he took in building this Browns defense in the offseason.
It's something that's not just done in a vacuum. Like, you have to do that hand in hand with like your coaches and your scouts, right? A big influence is ultimately how Kevin and Joe Woods, how they want to play on that side of the ball. You know, our defensive system has a lot of flexibility that's built into it, but it also does have some, call it, pillar principles. And then I think the second piece becomes like, okay, here are the skill sets by position that we value or that we think will make the biggest impact. What also is available to you in the player pool, because the reality of it is every team only has so many what I would call Superman positions, where you have that unicorn who can kind of do everything. There are only a handful of those players that exist. So with the rest of the player population, like, what skills are available and can you actually find and be in position to acquire, and how can all that come together to marry with your offensive or defensive system to ultimately produce wins.
Again, that's Browns general manager Andrew Berry on building out this defense. Let's welcome in 92.3 The Fans, Mac Robinson. Mac, appreciate the time. So you kind of get a look behind the thinking of Andrew Berry, and it's kind of interesting. You can see exactly the way he was going about building this Browns, not only defense, but this roster.
Right. And especially, too, you have to look at, the key part of there is, the player pool that was available and being able to acquire said players. So when it came to Andrew Berry, he was very opportunistic with a lot of those players. You don't see a Jadeveon Clowney out in the market every single year. Obviously, we saw him out there last year and, took advantage this year. But on top of that, too, you saw the different guys that they were able to acquire and really how they complement the rest of this defense. You look at an Anthony Walker, where he's more of a run stopper type of player, but also can, play on the outside a little bit as well, play a little bit in coverage, but has that versatility that you want and has that leadership quality. So, you have these different players that they've been able to bring in throughout this offseason, and really they might not be the perfect player. And like he says, only very few of those Superman players exist, but they were able to capitalize on bringing those players in. And not only that, they were also able to complement the other players that they already had on this roster.
Well, the other thing that Andrew Berry talked about, and again, it's pretty evident in the moves, is just the thought behind building depth, depth at a position versus bringing in a guy that is more of a role player. And this is what he said on that topic.
You probably start with both, hey, here's the baseline level of talent that we need, and here's how we would like that talent to produce, because this is the style of defense that we want to play. The reality is at all spots, you're never going to get both. So at that point, then maybe it changes, like, okay, really, how important is just overall talent at this position versus how important is the role to make the rest of the system work.
And again, I think that's what you're seeing with the versatility pieces that you're seeing all over this defense as well. Is, you can plug guys into different spots, and it's what good franchises figure out how to do that, and he's done that from the get-go.
Yeah, and you almost look at, and I know it's a different side of the ball, but last year what you saw from the offensive line, the offensive line, by the end of the year, you had tons of injuries and players that were going in and out. Obviously, Jack Conklin got taken out. You had Wyatt Teller, who was dealing with injuries. But at the same time, they had guys who might have played tackle that could kick inside. They had, Nick Harris, who could play a little bit of center, who also could kick out to guard. They had these players where, while the numbers were low, they were still able to utilize their versatility, take advantage of those low numbers. Now, also in that interview too, Andrew mentioned the fact that, they could only have 46 players on that roster. So on the active day roster. So, when it comes down to it, you want to have those versatile guys that look, you never know what can happen any given Sunday. So if some player goes down that you weren't necessarily expecting, okay, great. We have at least 3 other players who can at least mop up in that duty and can kind of piece together what you might have gotten from one of those players as well.
We'll hear a little bit more from Andrew Berry from the Athletic Football Show a little bit. Let's move on. Bleacher Report came out with the biggest X factors for the Browns team in 2021. And I got this one in the pre-show meeting. I nailed this one. I don't often do that. They go with Jadeveon Clowney.
Yeah, and I would say this. When it comes to Clowney's a pretty easy answer. I would say that. I think he's one that, obviously stands out. If you're looking for another option, I would probably also say Odell, I think, is somebody who can really be a standout. But when it comes to Clowney, you look at the production that you saw from Olivier Vernon last year. He was able to get down that stretch when Myles Garrett was down with COVID. You saw him be able to capitalize, be able to give that production that, was severely lacking at that point. When you're missing a Myles Garrett, you want to talk about a Superman. That's Myles Garrett to a T. So, you get that production out of Olivier Vernon. If Clowney can go ahead and give you that production in the pass rush, that's a cherry on top. He's known as a pass rusher for sure off the edge, but he's mainly an edge rusher a run stopper, I should say. He does very well at stopping the run on the outside, but if he gives you that pass rush that, you haven't quite seen to this point in his career, I think that's the cherry on top, and that can take this defense from good or great to elite.
I would agree, and I wouldn't necessarily get caught up in sack totals with Clowney. You want him to be disruptive, and that's kind of what his MO's been, and he gets kind of beat up a little bit nationally because he doesn't have the sack totals. He was a high draft pick. If he is disrupting and allowing Malik Jackson and Myles Garrett to get the sacks, money well spent.
Right. And that's the whole point of this is that, you have those guys on the back end too that are covering those players. If you go ahead and, if you're able to cover 3 to 4 seconds at that point, that should be more than enough time for Myles Garrett or Clowney based on just their sheer athleticism to be able to close that pocket. And then at that point, like you mentioned, Malik Jackson, you have Jordan Elliott last year, they took in round 3, who they're very high on going into this year. So all of a sudden, then you get that interior pressure. And now you're just slowly but surely like moving down that internal time clock for those opposing quarterbacks and really starting to rush that offense at that point.
So before we step aside, take a quick time out, we go to the voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about our Cleveland Browns. Let's take a listen.
Hi, Dave. This is Ron Byer. Dave, over the weekend, Kevin Stefanski needs to put up a sign outside the Browns facility stating all personal negative drama not allowed past this point. The only players allowed are ones who are ready to be team first with the passion to join together to become a Super Bowl winning unit. All the talk and high expectations must now turn into true winning actions starting on day 1 of practice, with the number 1 goal to improve daily to become a unified unit to accomplish the ultimate final goal, Super Bowl champions.
All right, that's Ron and Mac. I don't think that's going to be a problem. From everything we're gathering, I think these guys are ready to get after it and sense just how important this season could be and how special it could be for the Browns.
Yeah, for sure. And especially, you look at the difference, obviously, between the Freddie Kitchens era, that 1 year that he had here, compared to the last 2 that we've seen from Kevin Stefanski and his coaching staff. The players, they haven't really been talking as much. And, even the little bit that they have, they've been pretty humble for the most part. Now, obviously, everybody has egos and everything like that going into the season. But at the same point, this team is buying in. You go from a year ago where David Njoku is talking about wanting a possible trade to now he's happy and, there's a possibility that he could want an extension. So, going a year in this system, I look at the change in these players. I'm not really worried about the drama from these players. I think that everybody's just about bought in. And I mean, you look at, we just talked about Clowney. People in Tennessee have been warning about how, this guy doesn't buy in. This guy's just talk. And, you look at at least the offseason photos, and Jadeveon Clowney's ripped out of his mind, and he looks like he's challenging Myles Garrett to see who can look more like a Greek god between the 2 of them off the edge. So I think that you look at these players that have come in, And I think that everybody's pretty much bought in. I'm not really worried about the drama for the Cleveland Browns as much as I, would have been and probably should be based on the history.
Yeah, and I think Kevin Stefanski and Andrew Berry have a lot to do with kind of keeping the drama down and away. Matt Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. And I'm going to step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, where does Baker Mayfield rank in Chris Sims' national rankings? And who are the top play callers in the NFL? Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
Welcome back to Sports4CLE. As we showed you there, we are over 3 million unique viewers in still short of our first 3 months. We appreciate everybody tuning in. We appreciate all of our guests who have helped us had this extended and outstanding discussion. So thanks very much. And we hope to keep growing and keep it going. Tell somebody else to come and join us. Well, Chris Sims, friend of the show for a long time, has been on a couple of times. Ranked the quarterbacks in the NFL, and kind of interesting where he had Baker Mayfield. Let's listen to Chris Sims.
Number 13 on the Chris Sims top 40 quarterbacks right now in the NFL is
Baker Mayfield. Yeah. What up, Baker Mayfield at number 13? I mean, Baker Mayfield is a guy, again, if somebody told me I think he's the number 9 or 10 quarterback in football, I'd go, okay. I mean, I get it. I'm not going to fight against it. I mean, it was a huge year for Baker Mayfield. And really, I think the biggest thing I would just say is it's an elite arm. He's an elite passer, an elite thrower, whatever you want to talk about that way. But, I think the biggest thing that jumped out to me was the amount of high-level, high-degree difficulty throws that Baker Mayfield made throughout the year, and he doesn't blink or doesn't flinch, and he hits the bullseye. Ding, 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 bullseye. I mean, really, I think when I went back and watched, that was the thing I looked at. I mean, again, obviously he was more confident and knows the offense. Mm-hmm. Like Derek Carr, not necessarily the greatest runner, but a great mover. Can make people, is one guy free? Oh, I broke his ankles. Now I'm free and I can set up and make a throw. Oh, it's a bootleg. The guy on the edge didn't go for the fake. He's right there. Oh, I made a miss. Now I'm on the run and I made a throw and finished the bootleg. Oh, it's a bootleg. And there's a guy 25 yards down the field screaming across the field, going a million miles per hour. He's open by a quarter of an inch. I don't care. I'll rip it in there. Rips it in there. There's so many of those type of throws. In cuts where I go, ooh, are you going to throw that? Ooh, what a throw. Perfect throw. There's too many of those throws where they were almost Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, Mahomes-ish, where you go, is he really going to throw that? Oh, good throw. Oh my gosh, that was lucky. Wait, it's the 27th time I've said that. It's not lucky. He's that good now.
Let's bring back in Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. Mac, that's a quarterback's perspective on some of the things that Baker Mayfield can do. I think that's important to note.
Yeah, and especially too, somebody who's been watching the game for a while. I look at Chris Sims and what he, brought to the table there, and I tend to agree, to be quite honest. And I know that some people might get up in arms saying, Baker's already a top 10 quarterback. Let's just keep in mind, this is a national perspective. And over the last couple of years, obviously, you dealt with the stink of the Freddie Kitchens offense that really had to kind of wear off as he got used to that Kevin Stefanski offense and get, really comfortable with that group. So, seeing how far he's come and looking at how the national perspective on this has changed, I look at this as a positive step. And I think that by the end of the year, you could look at Baker Mayfield being in that top 10, possibly top 7. And dare I say, if he has a good enough year, possibly even top 5, possibly touching top 5. If he has a good enough season, I think that this is just a natural progression of Baker Mayfield. And I think that, honestly, with where we were at last season, I think that Baker Mayfield's right where he belongs at this point.
Yeah, and you can't really argue about that. So we're going to go back and hear some more. Andrew Berry from the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays talked about the importance of identifying and building around Baker Mayfield as the franchise quarterback.
I think it's fair to say that, we've always said that we believe the quarterback's the most important position in football, and we want to make sure that we have an environment that's conducive for that player, that position group producing at a high level, because that's how we believe you have sustained success in the NFL. I think in terms of maybe drilling down another level in terms of spending on side of the ball, I think at times, sometimes those analysis are they're not really capturing the whole picture, because so many people use, let's say, cash spending or cap dollars as like a measure of importance, which obviously
priorities,
it does,
yeah.
Right, it does have, but it ignores the fact that you only have so many premium resources in an off season, and some of those premium resources are, quite honestly, like high draft picks. But because those players are on rookie deals, their weighting probably isn't as appropriately captured if you look at it from a pure cash or cap perspective.
And it's important to note, Browns have one of the highest percentages of payrolls on the offensive side of the football. That was what Andrew Berry was alluding to. It's because of where they are. But again, the point is they realize you have to spend around a young quarterback to give him the opportunity to be successful.
Yeah, and especially too, early on in that rookie deal, you really have to take advantage of that. And I'll even say too, again, kind of getting back to what we talked about last segment, where, the opportunistic side of things. And it really has seemed like the last couple of years it's broken well for the Browns with what positions have been available. They looked at tight end, thought that was a massive need. They were able to go out, get Austin Hooper. And even going out last year, they ended up getting 2 tackles with Jack Conklin on the free agent market, and then being able to draft Jedrick Wills early on. So, being able to take advantage of some of those on top of building around that quarterback. Like you said, the quarterback is the most important position in all of football. And when you have a quarterback that is on a cost-efficient contract at that point, you have to take advantage of that opportunity while you can. So the Browns have a couple of years here where, hey, you know what? Baker's on a cheaper deal. We got to go for it. We got to go all in with this in order to make sure that we're taking advantage and that we're capitalizing on all this talent that we're able to retain because of that cap number.
Well, you mentioned a couple of the offensive linemen that the Browns got a season ago. Another guy who emerged was Wyatt Teller. And Wyatt Teller, sharing on social media, getting after it. He's getting ready for the season as well. As you see the big guy, and man, he looks pretty agile for as big as he is. Imagine a guy that moves his feet like that coming at you if you're a little DB my size. That's like drop, duck, and roll, the old fire drill. But
and at that point, you're looking at a car that's basically coming at you with the agility of a Puma. So, with the way that he's able to move in space and the size that he has, you can really see that he's really been training, getting his athletic ability correct and getting his technique down going into this year. You saw what he could do in 1 year of coaching with Bill Callahan, and that was already with improvements that he was trying to make on his own. So, with him getting more and more comfortable and being able to, take that next step, he's really improved. And, it's funny, going into last year, he was looked at as the weak point in that offensive line and the biggest question mark. Now, I guess it's Jedrick Wills. And if your number one question mark is a top 10 draft pick, you're doing really, really well on the offensive line.
Yeah, without question. Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan and I going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we'll check out a tweet where Devin Bush, linebacker, thinks he can cover Jarvis Landry. That and more when Sports4CLE continues. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
COVID-19 has changed how we show up and show out with our family. Now it's time to take the first step that lets us get back to talking smack with a side of mac and cheese.
Before we can safely come together, we need the facts.
As COVID-19 vaccines become available, you may have questions.
Should I get it?
Is it safe?
Should I wait?
It's smart to question. Now, get the facts at getvaccineanswers.org so you can make an informed decision when vaccines are available to you.
Woohoo, we're celebrating. Thank you for tuning in as we have passed our 3 millionth unique view in 3 months. We're going to continue talking Browns football. This is tweeted out by Aditi Kikubala from NFL Network, and it is regarding a Pittsburgh Steelers linebacker. Devin Bush says in the process of returning from his ACL surgery, asked if, when healthy, he can cover Browns wide receiver Jarvis Landry in the slot. Yes, 100%. Let's welcome back in Mac Robinson. And Mac, I think if Kevin Stefanski can scheme that matchup up, he takes that all day, every day.
Yeah, I think so too, to be quite honest. I think that Devin Bush, well, he's a young player. He's somebody who's coming into his second year in the NFL. And, he's athletically very gifted. He's a very talented linebacker, but I also think that with Jarvis Landry and the nuance that he's able to run with his routes, I think that, it's a tough cover. It's a tough ask to do. So, for me, I think that, I'll take Jarvis Landry going up against Devin Bush. I want to see that happen. I want to see that happen come this fall.
Yeah, and I got nothing. I don't mean that as a knock on Devin Bush. I'll take Jarvis Landry against any linebacker. So, again, if we can get that matchup, every down, please.
Yeah.
So we're going to move on. So Andrew Berry, again, speaking on the Athletic Football Show with Robert Mays, was talking about just how important it is to be versatile, just because of the way, versatile on defense especially, just because of the way football has evolved.
Football really is a war of attrition, and you do need it's both a war of attrition and the fact that you can only dress now 48, but it used to be 46 men up on game day. Like, you really do need people who can do multiple things in case you get into a tough spot. Not to mention, to your point that I think you were kind of leading to earlier, it is a matchup league, right? And how you may match up against Baltimore versus Pittsburgh versus Cincinnati, may be a lot different week to week to week, and you hopefully have the personnel to be able to stay within the pillar principles of your system, but be flexible enough to accommodate the strengths and weaknesses.
That's what's interesting, is that there's depth obviously stacked up.
And I think this is one of the things that's been the genius of the way that Andrew Berry has built this defense in the offseason. They can match up in a number of different ways.
Yeah, and that's really the key that you see from this defense. Obviously last year, you had some players that had gone down and, already you were kind of piecing together a defense. This year you saw the focus from Andrew Berry, and you saw, the attention to detail with getting some of these players coming in, adding a lot of depth. And really the key point there was versatility, like you mentioned. I mean, you bring in John Johnson. He's somebody who has played plenty of snaps at free safety, strong safety, in the slot, down in the box, and even Troy Hill on the outside or the inside. And that's not even mentioning JOK, who was brought in. He can play in the slot if you need him to. He can play middle linebacker, will linebacker, really whatever you need him to do. And that's on top of, the additions along the defensive line and countless other guys too. So, really in the NFL today, it's all about having those chess pieces and, being able to see how you stack up with guys on the other side. And when you have different players where you have, Tyreek Hill running those end arounds, and you have, Curtis Samuel lining up in the backfield, different players that are, being utilized as different chess pieces on offense, you need to have those same chess pieces on defense to be able to match up well. So, you look at a JOK and he can have that speed at the linebacker position to, maybe stop Lamar Jackson on that Monday Night Football play that ended up having the Browns lose. So, you can have some of those players who can be more versatile and be able to stay on the field longer. And that's more for the offense to have to prepare for as well.
So Pro Football Focus ranked the top defensive play callers in the NFL. These are defensive coordinators, obviously. So number 1, Brandon Staley, the Chargers. He's now the head coach. Number 2, Don Martindale. Keith Butler of the Steelers, 3. Josh Boyer of the Dolphins. Todd Bowles and Leslie Frazier of the Bills, number 6. So the Ravens and Steelers, 2 and 3. I would say, in fairness to the Browns, they didn't have the pieces. Joe Woods didn't have the pieces to really call a defense. But two of the teams in the division are 2 and 3.
Yeah, and that's something that's definitely going to be something that you have to prepare for, obviously. And, you saw early on in the season, they were plenty prepared. And, Andrew Berry has talked about in the past the fact that, the Ravens, they're one of the top secondaries. And, with the Steelers, they're one of the top pass rushers. So, these are two different defenses where, they can come at you with a ton of different looks. Obviously, in Baltimore, you have the talent of Jimmy Smith and Marlon Humphrey. And then, with Pittsburgh, we obviously know what happened with TJ Watt. We have countless times seen him go ahead and get after the quarterback. But I do think that it's going to be interesting to see how these two defenses play out this year, mainly because of the fact that, you saw guys like Matthew Judon go ahead and leave for New England from Baltimore. And then you saw Bud Dupree leave Pittsburgh after tearing his ACL last year against Cleveland. He goes on, he's going to Tennessee. So I'm going to be interested to see how they kind of mix and match some of these players that have left and who they're having replace them, how they're going to go ahead and deal with those players. So, maybe those guys were up 2 or 3 after this past season, but, like you mentioned, Joe Woods didn't have that same talent last year. Maybe you get him a full season of this talented defense. All of a sudden now you're talking about Joe Woods being up there because, his name was up there when he was with San Francisco, being the passing game coordinator. So he's somebody who I think is going to be a little bit of a riser this year, given the talent that he has gotten this offseason.
Yeah, now Pro Football Focus also ranked the top offensive play callers. Matt LaFleur, Packers, number 1. Brian Daboll, Bills, number 2. Andy Reid of the Chiefs down at 3. John Gruden, Raiders, number 4. Joe Brady from the Panthers, number 5. And Byron Leftwich of the Buccaneers, number 6. So Kevin Stefanski not on there. And, I know Byron Leftwich, good coach, but he has Tom Brady at quarterback, and Matt LaFleur has Aaron Rodgers at quarterback. Look no further than Adam Gase when he was the offensive coordinator with Peyton Manning, and find out what that happened when Peyton Manning went away. All of a sudden, he became a terrible play caller.
Well, and I'll say this. I'll give Matt LaFleur a little bit of credit when it comes to the balance and the fact that they've actually been able to give Aaron Rodgers a run game for, the first time in his career. And when's the last time that we said that Green Bay Packers had a solid run game? So, being able to utilize that, I'll give LaFleur some credit. I take some issue with 4, 5, and 6. I think 4 with Gruden. I think we're going based on namesake here, to be quite honest with you. I think that Gruden does a solid job. I don't think that he's a top 5 play caller. And Joe Brady, I think that, he was a solid offensive coordinator. He was great with Joe Burrow down at LSU. But at the same time, have we seen that in the NFL? He had Teddy Bridgewater as his quarterback. And obviously he had Christian McCaffrey, So all of a sudden now we kind of just go ahead, forget about that. And how he was able to perform these past 2 years. And the other part that I look at is, where's Kyle Shanahan? Kyle Shanahan was just being lauded as an offensive genius 2 years ago. And all of a sudden he has one down year and all of a sudden he's off the radar. So I think that Kevin Stefanski deserves to be right there. I'd love to see who's 7, 8, 9, and 10. But at the same time, I think that, Stefanski deserves to be up there. But I also think that they're missing a couple other names on there too, including Kyle Shanahan in San Francisco.
Yeah, and, it's important to note when you mention, Kyle Shanahan, there was a freakishly amount of injuries that derailed them a season ago as well. Mac Robinson and I are going to step aside, take one more time out. On the other side of break, we'll hear more from Andrew Berry. And this one is about, the anxiety associated with continuing to win as you have some success and you want to continue on it. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a line. A long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just a mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
At Social Security, we are always thinking of ways to save you time and make things easier. That's why we created My Social Security. A My Social Security account allows you to access your earnings history and benefits information, request a replacement Social Security card, get a proof of income letter, estimate and apply for benefits, and more. Save time. Go online. Open a My Social Security account at ssa.gov/myaccount. Social Security. Securing today and tomorrow.
Produced at U.S. taxpayer expense.
Sports4CLE continues, and again, we thank everybody for tuning in and watching. We're over 3 million unique viewers, and haven't gotten to our third full month of being on as a show. We're going to continue talking Browns. Andrew Berry on the Athletic Football Show podcast with Robert Mays talked about the success that the Browns have had and just trying to keep it going year in and year out, and it's something that he never takes for granted.
I've said this before, like no team that you design does everything always go 100% according to plan. And at this point, I feel like I've been in the NFL long enough where you realize just how hard it is to win games on a weekly and certainly a yearly basis. And it's a very, very humbling profession. So we certainly have a lot of optimism and belief with the players that we've brought in and how hard the guys have worked so far in the offseason. But our focus is really on controlling what we can control on a daily basis. Once we do get to the end of the season, we'll be where we want to be in all three phases.
Let's bring back in Mac Robinson. And Mac, that's a consistent message that you hear not only from Andrew Berry, but also from Kevin Stefanski.
Yeah, and it's amazing to see how these guys have gotten on the same page. I mean, we talked about in the past how, every single regime, it seems like there's some small little thing that ends up breaking the relationship. And, we're used to the dysfunctional relationship between the two. But, it really has seemed like they've been in lockstep, whether it be on talking points, whether it be on philosophy, just about everything, you name it. Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski are right in line with each other. And honestly, it is so refreshing to see on this side of things.
And the other thing is there's not a lot of chest thumping by either one of them. And with as much as the franchise has struggled, you could forgive a quick victory lap, but you get the sense they're not ready to take that just yet.
No. For them, it's basically, instead of taking that victory lap, it's how many laps do I have to take in order to go ahead and get that next victory? They're not worrying about that win that they just got. They're worrying about getting that next win and taking that, that 1 week approach. So, again, it's really refreshing to see the way that they've been able to take this in stride and really kind of go about this process as a whole. Everybody could, look at, the players that Andrew Berry has brought in and the way that he's been able to, refresh this entire defense and flip it in an offseason. And some people might, like you said, take a victory lap, take a little bit of that ego check for them. But no, Andrew Berry is just, taking it day by day and said, look, I mean, nobody's perfect. You're not going to accomplish everything in 1 year, even though it seems like he has. For him, it really is just about the day to day and not getting too high, not getting too low, and just, making sure that they're kind of keeping even keel. And that's really what you've come to expect between, Andrew Berry and Kevin Stefanski. It's pretty much just the even keel duo.
So we're going to move on. 3 things that the Browns must do better in 2021. This is according to dogpounddaily.com. They have utilized the run. They were pretty good at that a season ago, but that's one of the things they think they need to do better in 2021.
Yeah, I would say this. I think that by the end of the season, obviously early on, you saw them, running the ball early, often. And between Kareem Hunt and Nick Chubb, when he wasn't injured early on, you saw them doing that. The reason why I think you saw them start to get away from it is because, look, they were very efficient running the ball. But at the same time, they were keeping those defenses on their toes, keeping them setting back, and really, taking advantage of the fact that these teams were really expecting you to, run the ball heavy, early, often. But, the passing game was really catching up by the second half of the year.
Next one on it, get creative on defense. And I don't think they couldn't have got creative. They were playing with a bunch of pawns on the chessboard on the defensive side of the ball last year.
Yeah, and that's the one thing that I think is going to be very interesting to see. Obviously, like I mentioned before, Joe Woods was very highly touted coming into Cleveland, even getting the recommendation from Wade Phillips, who was talking to Cleveland back then. Getting that recommendation and seeing the talent that he had last year, especially, one of the main pieces was supposed to be Grant Delpit. Grant Delpit now coming off that torn Achilles. I think that getting him back all of a sudden, that's just another chess piece on the board. And I think that you're finally going to be able to see Joe Woods be able to kind of open up the playbook and look at, all these different players, all these different versatile looks that he's able to run. And he's going to go ahead and be able to utilize those and get creative. So I do think that, while it's one thing that they need to improve upon, I also think that it's also natural to expect that they will based on the players that they added this offseason.
Yeah, I would agree. And the other thing, the third thing, practice self-care.
I would say this. I think that, out of anything, if they're avoiding getting hurt, I think that's great. I think that that's kind of the way that you got to go about this. But I'll be honest, I'm not really sure what the author was thinking behind the self-care side of things. Because I think that, taking care of business, I think that's the way that I look at it. But I mean, other than that, I'm not really sure, how to kind of go about, the practicing self-care side of things, seeing as last year, it really seemed like they were, taking care of business and doing everything that they could in their own power to, take advantage of what they had.
Yeah, I would agree. Trying to stay healthy, but there weren't freakish, most of the injuries happened within the course of what football is. All right, before we let you go, we've got one more voicemail of Truth and Reason. This one about the Cavaliers.
Hey, this is BP and Pepper Pike. Long time no talk. Hope you're doing well. I wanted to know what you think of a possibility of the Cavs trying to trade Kevin Love and possibly some assets for Porzingis from Dallas or for C.J. McCollum from Portland. Now, they would probably have to give up some type of an asset, either a player, a current player, or a future draft pick. What do you think of that idea? Let me know, and keep up the great work, and take care.
All right, BP and Pepper Pike, a regular viewer. Trading Kevin Love is going to be tough. I like McCallum. Porzingis, I'm not so sure of. I don't know that I see a path to them trading Kevin Love. You'd probably have to give somebody, possibly a Colin Sexton. I don't know if I would do that. It would have to be something like that.
Well, I would say this. I look at the whole the Porzingis side of things, and I'm out on that. I'm out on that, to be quite honest. I know he's young, but also, the injury history. You're trading a guy who's slightly older, but at the same time is getting back somebody who's leaner and has just as bad of an injury history. And on top of that, in 3 years, instead of having a $28 million player option, instead you're stuck with somebody who has a $36 million player option. And spoiler alert, both of them are picking those up. So I look at both of those situations. I don't want either of them. CJ McCollum is somebody who's interesting, but at the same time, I feel like you're trading Colin Sexton. And I look at Colin Sexton, and I think that, to be quite honest, the Cavs should move him this offseason. I think that that's the best interest for the team going forward. I think that just the way that the team is kind of laid out, I think it makes the most sense. But I do look at, CJ McCollum, and I think that it's kind of just being a little redundant, getting another scorer who's a little smaller, and on top of that, is already getting paid. So you're just kind of fast forwarding a little bit with that. And I like CJ. I know that he's from here, and I appreciate that. But I just don't think that the fit is right there for CJ. I do think that they need a veteran, but I just don't think that Porzingis or McCollum are the right answers for this team.
Yeah, I would tend to agree. Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. As always, Mac, appreciate the time and the insight. Thanks very much.
Thank you guys for having me on, as always.
All right, Mac Robinson from 92.3 The Fan. We're going to step aside, take a quick time out. On the other side of the break, we shift gears a little bit. Buckeyes beat reporter from the Plain Dealer and cleveland.com, Stephen Means, will join us. We're going to talk about all the talk going on with expanding the college football playoff system. Sports4CLE will be right back. Stay with us.
Life is starting to get back on track, and you can too. If you or your family have experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Safely get the in-demand degree or training you need with online and on-campus classes. Go to tric-edu to check out our programs and resources. So, what are you waiting for? Register now for summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
As the COVID-19 vaccines become available, you might be asking yourself, should I get it? And if I do, will I be able to go about life without putting my family at risk? You've got questions, and that's normal. The fact is, the vaccines are safe and effective. They're going to save lives. To get the latest on the COVID-19 vaccines, visit getvaccineanswers.org, because getting back to the moments we miss starts with getting informed. It's up to you.
Sports for CLE continues. Again, we want to thank you for tuning in. We have gone over 3 million unique views in our first 3 months. Thanks for you for joining us and letting us bring you the information on sports. We're going to shift our focus now. Time to talk some college football. We're going to bring in Buckeyes beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com, Stephen Means. And we are going to talk a little bit first about the college football playoff and the proposed expansion that everybody's talking about. Stephen, as always, appreciate the time and the insight. So the expansion that's being talked about goes to 12 teams, which that's 3 times as many. Are you surprised that they're jumping all the way to 12 to get this thing rolling?
A little bit, yeah. I'm not surprised at the expansion. I think we all knew this was coming. I thought eventually, when this is all said and done, we'd be at 12, but I just thought that maybe there would be an intermediate step where maybe they go to 6 or 8. Feel that out, see if that works, and see if that makes everybody happy, and then you go to 12. I didn't think you'd see this immediate jump, but at the same time, I guess why not just cut out the middleman and get exactly where you felt like in the next 25 years you wanted to be at anyway. So I think 12 was a pretty quality number. I mean, it gets all the Power 5 conference champs in. It gets some of the Group of 5 people to feel happy about themselves if they can get into the playoff as well. And I think you get a real true champion if you've got to win 3-4 games in order to win a national championship.
The other thing is, it's kind of interesting. So what's being talked about is the top 4 conference winners that are ranked as the highest 4 conference winners would get the first 4 seeds. They would get buys. What that means is a team like, say, Notre Dame couldn't be one of the top 4 seeds and get a bye.
Yeah, good. Join a conference. It's 2021, Notre Dame. Stop trying to be difficult and just join a conference. You just did it this past season, and look what happened. You made the playoff. So, yeah, I'm glad that there was no special treatment that was put into play for Notre Dame. And really what we're talking about here with these buys is you're talking about Alabama's going to get a bye because they're probably going to win the SEC. Clemson's going to get a bye because they're going to win the ACC. And Ohio State's going to get a bye because they're going to win the Big Ten. Those are the 3 best programs in college football. And then that last bye will probably be Oklahoma, Oregon, USC. You know, it will alternate between a lot of different teams. Obviously, if there's another LSU situation like with Georgia, or if Michigan or Penn State can pop up, they can get a bye in those circumstances. But ideally, you're thinking the 3 best programs in college football have all but penciled their names in the 3 of those buys, and we'll see who ends up getting that other one every single year.
As you look at it, when would this take effect? How long would it be before they went to this 12-team playoff?
So the sooner the better, right? Obviously, they're not going to do it this year. We're going to stick with this format. And then 2022, you probably stick with this 4-team playoff again with that format. But 2023 is the earliest you can do it. And that's actually what makes the most sense from all standpoints. First of all, why are we doing this? Money. So if you want to capitalize on that as quickly as possible, then 2023 is probably an ideal spot to look at for when we get to this 12-team playoff. But since nothing is set in stone, and right now it's just an official proposal, I mean, anywhere between 2023 and 2026 seems like a likely ideal spot for this to start coming into place. But in the next 5 years, I think we'll see the 12-team playoff, whether it's sooner or later.
The other thing is it seems to me like, you know, the team that's the darling from the conference or the Group of 5, the Central Floridas or fill in the blank. There's always one, Coastal Carolina. Will this give them a shot, or will it always be, okay, there's 12, so they're the 13th or 14th team, or, when there's 4, they're the 6th or 7th team? Is it always going to be that way, or will this legitimately give one of those or 2 of those teams a chance to be in the football playoff?
No, I think this gives the Cincinnati's, the UCFs, the Coastal Carolinas, the BYUs of the world a legitimate shot to get into the playoff now. Because when it's 6, when it's 4, when it's 8, it's understandable why you put Georgia in over Cincinnati. It's understandable why you would put Penn State in, or LSU, or Oklahoma when those teams have 1 loss. Now, if Coastal Carolina is undefeated, if Cincinnati's undefeated, if UCF is undefeated, right now they're not battling teams who have 1 loss to other Power 5 teams. They're battling teams who now have 2 and 3 losses, and also probably didn't play in their conference championship game And so it doesn't make sense if you don't put those teams in at that point. And so what you'll start to see is the 8, 9, 10, 11 seeds are where you'll see those teams live. I don't think you're going to see more than maybe sometimes you'll see 2. Like I think this past year, had we had this set in stone, you would have saw Cincinnati and Coastal Carolina get in as 2 undefeated group of 5 teams. But most of the time, whoever is the UCF of that year in a 12-team playoff can get in if they as long as they win their conference championship.
Right, and the thing that this proposal has is the top 6 ranked conference champions. So that's the Power 5 and probably the best of the group of 5 beyond them. Do you think this legitimately has a chance at happening? Do you think this happens? Just a kind of a gut feeling. I know they're gonna discuss it at length. I believe it's a week from today. Next Friday is when they're gonna make this proposal and kind of hash it out a little bit.
Yeah, this is going to happen. It has to happen at this point. Expansion has to happen, and this many details probably doesn't get made public if you don't have a gut feeling like this. We're going to head into this direction. It's less about if and when we're actually going to see it take place at this point, even if it is still just in the proposal stage and you're still working out the details. This was a very detailed proposal that got public, and you don't do all that if you don't have a plan of eventually putting it in place. So if I had to bet some money on it, I'd bet a pretty lump sum, even though I'm not a gambling guy.
And the flip side of it is too, it also is, it's really good for the SEC and the Big Ten because it likely means multiple teams, if they've had the type of year that you would expect them to, the top level teams, multiple teams from those conferences are going to be in the 12.
Yeah, I think Ohio State benefits more than any team in the country when you think about it, because they've been knocking on the door and have been told no more than anybody else. They've been 5 and 6 pretty much all 7 years that we've been in this college football playoff. It's either they're in or they're right on the outside, and they just got left out. And then Ohio State fans are in an uproar. So I think Ohio State doesn't get left out anymore. It opens room, though, for the Penn States and the Michigans of the world, or the Wisconsins or the Northwesterns of the world, who are pretty quality programs, but they have to play Ohio State every single year. I think what we're really going to find out, especially in a 12-team playoff where there's multiple teams from conferences, is the SEC really the best conference in college football? Because I think we all assume it, and that's a lot of college football is assuming things, but I do think a lot of the SEC is propped up by the fact that Alabama is the monster that it is. And so if you're putting these situations where if you don't have a bye week and you're getting these home quarterfinal games and you get a Wisconsin versus Florida, or you get a Michigan versus a Georgia or LSU and on down the line, and the Big Ten starts winning some of these games that you typically wouldn't see, I think in the next 5 or 6 years, we might have to reevaluate the rankings of who actually is the best conference in college football.
Yeah, and last thing before we take a quick break and we'll shift our focus to the Buckeyes, this is really good for college football because it will open up and create a couple of weeks similar to what goes on with the basketball tournament.
It's interesting. I think it's good. Everything has its good and bad. I think it's interesting because everything isn't do or die in week 3 of the college football season anymore. Because not in the old days, today, if Ohio State loses to Oregon, well, then fans are just like, are we going to make the playoff? Are we going to make the playoff? You lose to Iowa, you're out. You lose to, Purdue, you're out. Now you can have one of those early season losses as one of the powers that be in college football and not be on edge thinking that your season is over because your chances of winning a national championship are done. Now, it does put pressure on you to not lose again, but it puts a lot more. It's almost like how it is in the NFL, where it's a lot more about positioning for the playoff than it is whether or not you can actually win a national title just because you lost one game.
Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. We'll step aside, take a quick timeout. On the other side of the break, we'll talk a little bit about Buckeyes football. Sports4CLE. We'll be right back. Stay with us.
Better days are ahead. Be ready with the training you'll need to get a great job. If you or your family has experienced financial hardship as a result of COVID-19, Tri-C can help with full tuition assistance. Whether you want to improve your skills, get certified, or train for a new career, go to tri-c.edu to check out our programs and resources. So what are you waiting for? Register now for online and on-campus summer classes. Tri-C is where futures begin.
When it comes to selling you a mattress, most retailers are handing you a long line of extra steps that drive up costs and create confusion. At the Original Mattress Factory, we simplify the mattress shopping experience by building mattresses and box springs in our own local factories and selling them direct to you. It's short, sweet, and simply makes sense. So experience more than just the mattress store. Experience an original, the Original Mattress Factory.
First, they said cigarettes were safe. We know how that turned out. Now, they say they didn't market e-cigarettes to teens? Fact, more than 1 in 4 high school students are vaping, and 80% say their first e-cigarette was flavored. Vaping is harmful to developing brains. The reason we think vaping is safe? Marketing. Same lies, different day. Tell Big Vape to quit lying.
Sports4CLE continues. I'm Dave Bacon. We're going to talk some Buckeyes football with Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Stephen, who are some names of some guys that have caught the attention of the Buckeyes this spring?
Obviously, yeah, it starts with C.J. Stroud and Kyle McCord and Jack Miller in that quarterback that ever-going quarterback battle. It's interesting, especially with Jack Miller and C.J. Stroud, you know, being in the program for a year. It's seeing them and how much more physically built they looked than they did last year. C.J. Stroud looked like Justin Fields' little brother last year. He doesn't quite look like that anymore. He looks like an actual college quarterback now, and the same with Jack Miller. And then obviously you've got Garrett Wilson and Chris Olave. Those are probably the 2 best wide receivers in the country. But now they've got a third guy who might, along with those 3 musketeers, and that's going to be Jackson Smith-Njigba. He'll move into the slot, allowing Garrett to move back outside. I think Jackson Smith-Njigba is a guy to watch from a breakout perspective. Obviously, everything starts with Garrett and Chris, but as teams are scheming up and being so prepared to worry about those 2 guys, I think Jackson Smith-Njigba might be able to make some noise this year. And then obviously running back Travion Henderson, who has just had the J.K. Dobbins name thrown on him since the moment he got here. He didn't play football last year because Virginia moved his football season to the spring, so he enrolled early. The number 1 running back in the country, that's a guy to keep an eye on as we head into the season, especially that Minnesota game where, if you remember, in 2017, J.K. Dobbins, as a true freshman, went up to Indiana in a Thursday night primetime game and had 181 rushing yards, and that's how Ohio State met J.K. Dobbins. I think Travion Henderson might be in for a similar type of performance when we get to that Minnesota game on Thursday on September 2nd. And then on the defensive side of the ball, really just a refresh secondary, whether it's, you know, Cam Martinez and Lathan Ransom in the slot, whether it's Sevin Banks becoming the number 1 corner and showing up on, you know, first-round NFL mock draft, whether it's Cam Brown coming off an injury or Ryan Watch, who flashed a lot this spring. I think you're going to see a much better secondary, especially now that Kerry Combs is in year 2 as a defensive coordinator, and they got to go through a normal spring where things weren't, you know, interrupted by COVID.
It sounds like Ryan Day and that offense is pretty good, and Buckeyes fans shouldn't worry about all the talent that's left because there's plenty there to replenish, is what you're saying.
Yeah, on offense, I don't think Ohio State fans need to worry about Ohio State offense until Ryan Day leaves. And whether that's tomorrow or that's 25 years from now, here are 2 things that are always going to be true about Ohio State. They're going to have an elite level quarterback who is at a Heisman level by the end of the season when we get to that Michigan game. There's going to be a ridiculous amount of wide receiver talent that's always going to replenish itself, even as guys, you know, leave, whether for the NFL or through the transfer portal. And that quarterback's going to be well protected by an offensive line, and there's going to be an elite running back. And then on defense, obviously, as long as Larry Johnson is here, there's going to be first-round NFL defensive ends, whether it's Chase Young or Nick Bosa in the past. Obviously, Zach Harrison would probably be up next, and Tyreek Smith. And then you've got true freshman right here from Columbus, Ohio, Jack Sawyer, who has been baby Bosa since he was 15 years old. So the one thing you don't have to worry about with Ohio State is talent. Only thing you really have to worry about is if it's able to come together, and is it enough to beat teams like Alabama and Clemson.
Stephen Means, Buckeyes beat reporter for the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. Thanks so much for the time and the insight. Thanks very much, Stephen.
Thanks for having me.
All right, Stephen Means. Make sure you read them in the pages of the Plain Dealer as well as cleveland.com. That'll do it for Sports4CLE. Scheduled guest Monday, Mary Kay Cabot. Browns mandatory minicamp gets underway Tuesday. Have a great weekend. We will see you Monday. Sports4CLE.